Hello, welcome to the Big Strategy Podcast. I'm your host and fellow strategist, Jeff Hyatt. This is your go-to spot for real talk with the masterminds of business strategy. It's about sharing stories, insights, and those little nuggets of wisdom to help you unlock big growth. Let's turn the key and spring into action.
Well, welcome everyone to this episode of the Big Strategy Podcast. It's my honor to be joined by Hassan Murad, who is the CEO of Intuitive AI, and he's going to be telling us a bit about his innovation, Oscar, which is an innovation after my own heart, which we will learn about as we go through this process. But Hassan, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Very excited for this conversation, or shall I say, trash talk.
I don't want to say that's a rehearsed line. That was completely off the cuff. But hey, so if you would, please, we ask every guest the first question just to get us started. And that's please introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So Hassan Murad, co-founder, CEO, also the chief trash talker here at Intuitive. My whole background is I come from Pakistan. My co-founder is from India. And we both grew up seeing the waste problem firsthand. And as we immigrated first to Dubai, thanks to our families, and then to Canada, our whole experience in robotics really shaped who we are, and started getting a lens from a robotics or AI perspective. And, really we're propelled to be solving problems that actually mattered. That's a little bit about us. And I'll be diving into like how we found the issues, the problems, and how that robotics got applied to something meaningful.
Well, you teed it up perfectly. The first question I always ask an entrepreneur is, from a design thinking lens, I always emphasize optimism as an important part of the mindset. And that optimism described as a belief in a better way. Right. And so in your experience, what was that grain of sand in your shoe, or just that, what did you first see where you said there's got to be a better way?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of our families naturally, as we sort of live in India and Pakistan, you kind of, always have to be finding solutions or creating solutions because that's the limited resources. It really forces you to create inventions. And so something that personally that I remember, my granddad and my dad is a huge influence into the way that we think. And so it's no matter what job or business or project that you're working on, it's always what's the impact you're making, and are you helping people in any way, shape, or form? And so that's something that is not an afterthought, but is more of the first thought is what are the problems that exist, and if we solve this, will this impact a lot of people in a positive way? And so that was something that was sort of baked into my genes at a very early age, watching my granddad sort of significantly help a village become a city, during the partition, and also kind of seeing my dad do that from going to 0 to 1 moment again. And then, me coming to Canada and learning robotics and getting to apply robotics in different applications and be a fly on the wall, I'd say, in looking at how autonomous drones were being applied to solve problems like wildfire detection and other issues that I think you're seeing everywhere be critical if those problems get scaled and a business solution is created. At the same time, autonomous submarines that I got a chance to kind of work on, and then there was an opportunity to go down to Tesla in the autopilot team as an intern. And so, again, was very lucky, even though I was an international student, and it was almost impossible for me on my Pakistani passport to go down to the US They had selected me to kind of express visa and be part of a team that was really building the first autopilot, and kind of experience firsthand how Elon kind of runs the team. Elon is a very polarizing figure at this moment, so that could be another conversation. But I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. And look, I think it speaks a lot to just Canada has a different perspective on immigration than the United States, and you're clearly an example of how that can have a positive outcome. And yes, as someone who uses Tesla's autopilot, it's unreal. You can't describe it until you've actually used it. But that was, as we know, a long time coming. So I love the familial inspiration. Like you said, I don't know that people always understand, but in Pakistan and in parts of India, I mean, people are literally burning animal dung to cook their food over or to bring warmth to their homes, and with an air quality index over 300 pretty consistently, it meaningfully impacts their lifespan, taking 10 years off people's lives. And so living in that, I imagine you couldn't help but be motivated. Someone with your surroundings of your father and your grandfather and your own personal belief. So with that all being said, of all the places you could have, taken your talents, so to speak, what brought you into not just sustainability, but more specifically, this element of robotics and recycling sorting?
Yeah, and so I get this question quite a bit. It's my mom looked at it as like, you did robotics and then drones and submarines and Tesla, and then you decided to jump into garbage. And that was like a very tough conversation with my mom because it was right after I was graduating, and I was, planned to go back and work in the autopilot, or specifically go back to Tesla was the goal. And then that shift was really disappointing to her, especially as a brown mom. She was very dramatic and Bollywoody. And I was like, "Look, Mom, this is something that we discovered, me and Vivek, that 98%." So there was a report that we were studying to kind of see what are the biggest problems that humanity is facing that we should try to help with, right? So we're very inspired by obviously Tesla and other people, but when there's like tens of thousands of people working in a company and they kind of call themselves a startup, you kind of feel like you're one tiny piece of the bigger vision. And so that was something that was ingrained in us, is, all right, why don't we take the next couple of years, kind of, experiment and risk it. And so background was unique in terms of this AI robotics exposure that we had. And we started sort of looking at problems to solve. And one that really hit home, quite literally, was waste. And that report that I was mentioning was by the World Bank, which is called What a Waste 1.0 at that time. And it basically said that 98% of whatever we generate ends up in landfills, oceans, dumps, developing countries.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a game changer, right? Like there was this outlook at that moment that Germany and America and Canada, we recycle. We know what we're doing. And
Right.
look at it sort of on a global stat, you're just like, we're not. We're just shipping it off to China at that time specifically. And then Philippines, India, Pakistan, all of these areas, we're basically tipping them off so that they would actually deal with it. And they don't deal with it because, its rules are much more relaxed in some ways over there, and they get pushed out. And then when they push it out into the rivers and the oceans, and it's like, we're pointing there and we're saying, look at what's happening. And so,
Yes.
so that really kind of was the turning point to us, is like the frustration that we had built in us after reading and looking at this real picture, is that we're blaming here that these are the countries that are doing it. The materials, when you kind of look at the investigative journalism that had been done, is like, well, this is a material that was generated clearly in North America or Europe. We don't even sell this here yet. And so that was a huge turning point for us to really say, okay, what's broken here? And the biggest thing that we realized after, like, and I can get into the stories of how daily there were rejections of nobody wanted to help. When you're trying to figure out, everybody's like, no, it's working. I have everything I need. But really that realization was, this is an industry that is ancient. This whole waste management facility that crosses facility management, this is ancient in the way that it's being run. And there aren't the right players for the right incentives here. And so that's really was the turning point for us to be like, all right, this industry needs technology, whether it's AI or whether it's better systems, whether it's robotics. That's not what we were thinking, but it was like, this problem is what we're married to solving, and the solution will eventually be made if we're at it.
What I love about what you're sharing is, design thinking. Oftentimes entrepreneurs start a business because of a financial incentive or a financial opportunity. And if it's beyond a financial opportunity, it can go back to because new technology is invented, right? You weren't a robot looking at waste. You went all the way back to desirability and really built a strong why around this problem. And as you just said, and I want to make sure it's highlighted, is that yes, robotics is the avenue you're addressing today, but it's not the only avenue to solve this problem. And I think if things change, you would probably be willing to pivot simply because you're so attached to the why you started this business.
110% or 1,000,000% correct, Jeff. It is so critical that entrepreneurs and students and anybody that is about to even think of an idea is not looking at the solution as like, this is it, right? It is more understanding the true problem, and that excites them, and being so married to that and be nonstop to be thinking about, like, I need to make a dent in this, and I don't know how I'm going to do it, right? But I'm going to figure that out, and be willing to kind of rewire your brain as you're going through it, because we've had massive failures along the journey as well. We started with a robotics bin that I can get into, but you've got to be willing to pivot at the right time, and that taking the ego out of the equation is huge.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. And I can't emphasize that enough to those listening, is whether you're starting a company or just an initiative within an existing organization, it's taking the ego out is so key to success. And because success, in my opinion, comes not from the lone genius, but from the wisdom of the group. And in that respect, you can't have ego. So let's move the conversation forward a little bit. You've identified this problem. You married this challenge with the technical expertise that you have. And I came about this challenge because, again, one of the personas that we've identified when we were doing work for a client was something called the wish cycler, or someone who wanted to make an impact, but sometimes got frustrated that the infrastructure around them didn't necessarily allow them to be as sustainable as they had envisioned themselves.
Right.
How about Oscar? Tell us about that solution. Did it align with that persona or a different persona? And how did you go from there?
Yeah, for sure. And so maybe I'll start off with the wish cycling piece, because, there's this massive problem that's the macro view of it. And then us figuring out that actually the industry has zero technology. They're just going off of numbers that, somebody has estimated years ago. And the waste management companies or certain individuals that control the industry are not here for the right incentives. And even if they are, they're just pointing towards wish cyclers, right? Which basically is that if you look at the material that is going to a waste management company, that if you open up a recycling bag, that has everything in it. And from different types of plastics to compost to garbage material to electronics. And that's this feeling that people have, is that, I just want to recycle. And I think if I dump it in the recycling bin, I'll feel better. And potentially, hopefully, I wish that it gets recycled, because throwing it in garbage, well, that's going to go to landfill for sure. So I think that piece is where it is so badly contaminated that when a waste management company gets the bag or tons and tons of material, they almost certainly know that this has to be sent to landfill, because if they try to put it in their machinery, this is going to wreck their machinery, and the entire city is going to be at a standstill because waste is not going to be able to be processed at a recycling level. So not completely. I mean, everybody kind of blames the waste management side. The tech over there is just very outdated as well. It has improved significantly now in the present day. But when you look at like when we were starting, it's just there's no AI, there's no robotics, and recycling is very, very detrimental towards the whole system. And so the cross section we found was that it is not at the recycling facility where we need to be helping specifically, or everybody was like, hey, why don't you start cleaning up the oceans, right? Like think about just going to Pakistan and going to China and going to Philippines, and why don't you like clean up the rivers and the oceans over there? And it's like, all right, well, we could, and we are funding and supporting things like this, but that's a Band-Aid. The problem starts much higher up, right? Like it is definitely design of materials, the creation of materials. But if you're trying to get in and support that immediately, that's at where the consumer walks up. You and we walk up with that item that we just drank or we just ate, and we're about to throw it in a bin. And that bin in a mall, airport, university is essentially where we found as like the cross section where we could make a difference and merge the facility management, the waste management side of it, the operational side of it, and then also make it interesting for the brands to get involved and own up to the narrative and the data that is at this cross section. So we call it the bintersection, where a lot of these things.
That's hilarious. I'm sorry, you caught me off guard. That's great. The bitter section. That's good, man. And people won't forget it. But I think you touched on something that's really important is, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. And in that respect, we say pollution is a wicked problem, right? Waste pollution is a wicked problem because on one hand, you have soft drink companies telling us that their bottles recyclable, but yet it comes from oil, and every time we recycle it, those polycarbon molecules deteriorate, and so there will be a time when they actually are no longer recyclable. And then at the end, we see the output. But if we just invent a big ocean sweeper, that's treating the symptoms, right? You're not treating the underlying cause. Exactly. And you're right. The one thing that really struck me from that wish cycler perspective was a client in the waste industry that I work with. From one recycling facility, they sent 2 tractor trailers, like full on tractor trailers of recyclable material to the landfill every week, or pardon me, every day, not every week, every day. And how could that be? Well, for example, if you buy sushi, that black plastic tray that the sushi comes in is not recyclable. Right. Well, it has a number stamped on it. It does, but there's no secondary market for colored plastic that justifies the cost of sorting it. So, right, this is just an example of how those economics get in the way. And I think this is a real good use case for your product, Oscar, and what it does. So can you take us a little bit inside the R&D lab, if you will, and what about Oscar? How was that developed? What was your MVP? How'd you prototype it? What was your MVP? How did that process evolve on your way to the product that you have today?
Yeah. For sure, for sure. So, I mean, it started off as like, our background is robotics AI, so we just jumped in head first and said, you know what, people can't sort. We're giving bad materials to the waste management companies, which they complain about, and so we'll get data. We'll build this bin that basically sorts it for us. And so we built essentially a garbage bin that you walk up, has one hole, you throw the item in or you shove it in, and then essentially it sorted that material, really chucked it into the right container. And so made it easier for people. And then, you put it out into the real world, and then you start seeing what happens with it. And, initially you think you just throw robotics AI at it, this is going to be the best thing ever. And so you get the wake up call of how the business model is terrible. And I'll get into that piece. But the other aspect was that actual data was showing us people were getting dumber. And so
Tell us more about that.
And so what was happening is that we put a bin on one side of the property, and the other side, we didn't have the bin, but we were surveying on both sides. And essentially people over time, we were telling them on how this bin essentially sorts it inside. And over time, we were seeing that their diversion rate on the other bins that didn't have the tech were getting dumber. And then we started sort of surveying, like, hey guys, like, what's happening? We've noticed the sorting
Totally
has dropped in this university. Like, and then they preach to us that no. Do you know that this recycling technology is actually sorting it in the back end? And I'm like, no,
no, there's not actually. No.
We built the technology. That thing there just sorts it for the bin that it is. It's not, there's no magic here. And so that was interesting, is like misinformation spreads very quickly. I mean, we all know that now, thanks to but misinformation could be so dangerous and deadly in this case, because what was happening is when people were getting dumber in the other areas, even in the bins that we were seeing, people were just stuffing everything in. So they weren't really following any of the rules. They were just like, let me just get rid of stuff. So it didn't actually help in terms of recycling rates. So you've created more waste. And the business side of it was that you have 800 bins to map out in a university, 200 bins in a stadium, 500 or something at an airport. They're not going to, we're basically asking them to throw away their bins to generate more trash into the world, to basically essentially take this system that could be an operational nightmare if power or something goes off, because it completely blocks the user. So I won't even get into the business economic side of it, but I think as engineers and, like sort of just jumping into solutions, you don't sort of think of scalability. And one thing that was happening at that time was like, we're looking at our failures and we're just like scratching our heads, and we have AI that detects materials, and we're just like, why don't we use that AI to basically shout at that person that's coming up to them and just tell them, stop, man, stop, put this thing in this bin. And then, we were like, let's just prototype this. Let's prototype this out. We hacked it up. We first took, even to like prove the fundamentals, we took a GoPro and we went downstairs. There are several versions of this experiment that we kept on testing. But the initial thing was, will a camera next to the bin start changing behavior in some ways if we provide and add signage to it? And what we immediately started noticing is we put this contraption that we developed downstairs in the food court at our office, the building, and immediately people were starting to see, and we're standing in that vicinity, and people are like, "Why is this thing here?" And then the other person next to them was like, "Yeah, well, because you never sort, this is hopefully gonna monitor you or help
interesting.
you out."
So it was a legit like human next to the contraption to actually physically deliver that message?
We were observing, and we had the camera, the GoPro over there, and we weren't
Got it.
physically telling. Again, there were several experiments where we started putting digital displays, sounds, so step by step, sort of accelerated that. But as we were standing next to it to sort of hear the feedback, people were like, "Well," they were joking, and then the other thing that we noticed is people's times went up in trying to sort. Right. Now they were attempting to sort versus walk up with a tray, dump, put the tray,
Got it.
run
so
away.
There was you were witnessing contemplation, engagement. People were thinking about something that before they took for granted.
Exactly. And so
Nice.
that immediately, like, rather than building some sort of crazy technology and then going and testing it out, we were instantly like, what is the quickest, hackiest way to see whether this could change behavior? And essentially what we discovered was the Hawthorne effect exists, right? There is the feeling that if there is something that is monitoring, then that could be changing behavior. So then we said, okay, this is heading in the right direction. Obviously, we don't want a system that is like, hey, Jeff, you've had too many Ferrero Rochers today. Maybe discount on the next one. And so it was so critical for us to be creating something that didn't exist, but also creating something that we wanted the world to be having, that is not invading privacy. And so what we did is we created the AI that only focused on waste and really took the person out of the equation, right? And then essentially Oscar came to be, as people know, which is, it is an AI powered screen that has the waste sensor on the top, and it can attach to any recycling bin, right? Whether it is in a mall.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And so we don't need to ask them to throw their bin away, right? It retrofits to their existing infrastructure. So in a mall, airport, university, corporate campus, that could be in Japan, or that could be in San Francisco, or that could be in Dubai. It doesn't matter, because it would adopt to whatever the recycling rules were. And it would just update as things change. And so, yeah, it was quite a bit of a journey, and I'm happy to get into like what we're seeing in terms of data now.
At the Berkeley Innovation Group, we are a strategy consultancy and AI advisory firm focused on mid-market companies looking to unlock big growth. In contrast to management consultants' typical top-down, hypothesis-driven approach, Big uses a curiosity-inspired, bottom-up approach, leveraging customer insights to drive strategy co-creation. Learn more about our approach by downloading our ebook at biginnovates.com/ebook. Now, back to the show.
You have that MVP and you're testing it in the market, but how your product market fit has been defined as people's lives are actually worse off without your product or service. Do you agree with that? And have you found that with Oscar?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, and for any business, the very first thing is, can you convince, trick someone to pay for that service? And
right,
not only for that first year, but second, third, fourth, really tells you product market fit, right? It is that people will not only pay once and by mistake, but will continuously keep paying for the service because that definitely adds value. And I mean, the properties and the facilities we're dealing with are like the largest airports, the largest universities, the largest corporate campuses. So that significantly signals to us. And so today, obviously, we're across 5 continents, 20 countries, and map some of the biggest airports and universities that are out there. So in Canada, from University of Toronto to Calgary to down in the States in MIT, ASU, and multiple others that I could name. But it's just amazing to see where the experience around a garbage bin was 0 seconds, right? Like nobody wants to interact with a bin or spend a second because there's nothing to do. And we have created, and we noticed the bin intersection and defined it and religiously built an experience around it, right? So it's similar to how like going to a Starbucks, pre-Starbucks wasn't an experience. And
Correct.
post Starbucks, there's the coffee shop experience, right? That Starbucks created in this world. And that's really where we've created an experience around the Oscar that is insane to see. And I didn't want to do this to you, Jeff, but I'll pop quiz.
Do it. Let's do it. You know, I have to take my own medicine sometime. I can't be the only one giving quizzes. I have to take them. So let's bring it on.
Here we go. Your students are going to enjoy this. So what do you think is the most shown item to an Oscar in the world?
I mean, my first reaction is a plastic bottle.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. See, students, he didn't get it right.
I didn't get it.
It's top five. So you're close.
Okay. All right. So I'm close. Yeah. Again, like I would think then I would take kind of the position of like a wish cycler and say like some kind of thin film plastic or something like that.
Right. So again, you're right.
0 for 2. Thank you for being generous, but I'm 0 for 2 in other words.
Yeah, top five. And
so what is it? You're killing me.
Yeah, it is actually the mobile phone.
What? That makes no sense.
Exactly. And
yeah, so good. So tell us more.
Most shown item to an Oscar is the mobile phone, hands down. And that's what confuses a lot of people. People think that this is like what Intuitive is working on, and these Oscars are like, you know, helping just with the trash and the waste management side. And what they don't realize is what Oscars become is that it is the biggest engagement tool that we have basically disrupted this garbage bin experience that people have.
Yeah.
And we've started a conversation. Nobody wants to kind of be lectured on climate and sustainability and other important things, but you've got to meet them where they're at. And so the experience that we started seeing at Vancouver International Airport that, you know, we're so grateful for, you know, they gave us our first shot where we, you know, they found some money to essentially get their initial Oscars in. And essentially what we started understanding was people, like we didn't have the mobile phone programmed or trained. And we started noticing from data that this is something that is very, very commonly shown. And we started going to the site to audit, to understand. And so the usual experience is people are drinking something. They don't expect the bin to talk trash. They throw the thing and it's like, hey, what are you doing? And then instantly they realize, and the next thing in their hand is the mobile phone. And so they quiz Oscar by showing their phone. It's like, what is it going to say? And so we quickly...
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That is fascinating.
And to make that, to like triple down on that, we instantly created an experience that basically, we saw that every person is going to show their phone. We then recognized the object and we said, and next time now, whenever a person shows the phone, it says, hey, put that back in your pocket. And that's essentially this Easter egg that throughout that we've seen hands down be something that people bring somebody else and say, hey, why don't you show your phone?
Check this out. Yeah,
exactly. And so that was the start of us realizing that Oscar's doing something much bigger than just helping recycling out. Because people were listening, right? People are understanding, and we're getting 92% diversion rate, which is like insane, right? You're getting 17%
that's an
recycling.
insane number.
17% recycling. We're at 92% when we add in the rewards and when we brand that experience and everything. And then we see this other piece happen of like, all right, well, recycling's great, but people are trying to play around with Oscar. They're trying to show everything. They're trying to show their glasses and their watches, and so
So now it's a game.
exactly. And
That's
so
great.
now when you go to a stadium, for example, we're asking questions about, like we introduced this new feature called trivia. And
Okay.
trivia is essentially, you can use thumbs up and thumbs down to play with Oscar, and potentially you could win something. And
Great.
so,
What a great experience.
yeah, and we see at stadiums, people are spending, 2 to 5 minutes of their time playing games with Oscar to try to win, because it might be a Taylor Swift concert or Carrie Underwood or Adam Sandler or whatever, whoever's performing, or Boston Celtics are playing.
Right.
We ask questions about who's there, and we have different formats, but we essentially have one of the three questions we ask. The first one is about Taylor Swift or whoever is playing in the background. Then we ask a little bit more about sports, let's say, and then we dive into like, hey, that bottle in your hand, don't forget that belongs in recycling when you're done.
Right.
And thumbs up if you got that, and if you'll bring that back. And
is that a time when they're open to hearing this message?
exactly. That's the biggest thing, is that you have met people where they need to be met, and why they are here. You're trying to get people's attention to focus on the message, which is Oscar's mission is to make sure that nothing ends up in landfills, oceans, or developing countries. But you can't start there when a person doesn't even believe in recycling, right? And doesn't even believe about what you are setting out to do. And so one of the things we do at the end over there is, we have a winner for somebody to win a trip to Hawaii, for example, or a trip back home. And that has the rewards aspect of it, is where we're seeing a lot of different brand partnerships and sponsorships come in, where people are like, can I ask this question, but can I also give away this experience to people?
Sure. What an amazing experience. And to just to kind of recap what we've been to, I mean, you started with a GoPro, and by testing that GoPro, you've actually developed to a place where you've created an interactive experience for the human. And all throughout that, you've had very little talk today of AI, very little talk of robotics. Although that's core to your solution, you're spending so much time on just understanding your user. And imagine how much more AI and robotics, if you will, you can put into that system if you have them for 2 to 5 minutes versus literally not even being on the radar screen and just a passing thought like a traditional waste bin.
Exactly. And so we've never sort of thought of it from like, there's the going back to the point that you summarized, when you're married to the problem, AI, robotics, other things that pop up, you'll utilize and bake into your technology to deliver at the end of the day and solve the consumer's problem, right? Consumer or whoever your customer is. And so it's almost like, you see a world, and then you see how your consumer is reacting to it, and you've got to figure out the technical side of it for sure.
Yeah, to your point, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's clearly is not what you did in this respect. So let's move the conversation a little bit into the technology and tell us, how do you use AI and robotics today? And then not just that, but what are the future iterations of this? Give us the current state and also a little bit of a projection into the future.
Yeah, for sure. So robotics and AI combined is where we started, where it was physically sorting the materials. So, the mechanisms inside were really sort of making sure that materials coming in are being put into the right bin. And then we moved towards behavior change with Oscar, right? How do we use AI to actually, so the sensor that we're talking about is looking at the world, right? Its world is materials. And so it is trained on thousands of materials, and it is predicting anywhere from 80 times a second all the way to 150 times, depending on the models that we run. It is predicting that. So you could, I break that down, 80 times in a second is what it's trying to predict. So in 1 second, we could think, I don't know, it takes us a couple seconds to think of something. But this
one thing, let alone 80 things, right?
And so it is doing 80 predictions in 1 second. And that is toggled up or down depending on situations. But that's what was really critical for us is we are trying to intercept a person's behavior as they are walking, in a stadium with a can, and they're about to throw this away, right? They might be too fast, too furious, but how do we intercept their behavior and get them to sort correctly? So really, it is us understanding what's the object way before they've even come up, and then nudging them on the screen in the right visual message that is intuitive, right? And so it can't be 700 recycling rules that we put up on the screen, right? If I start showing you, Jeff, that bottle goes here and can goes here and spoons go here and forks go here.
Yeah, not going to happen.
It's compostable, but look at the plastic numbers 4 or 5 or 2 or 3. That just doesn't work. So, and hence why the company is named Intuitive is like, we're trying to make this very, very intuitive. And we give the person the decision that, hey, and it's a nudge where they're walking up and the screen turns to the item that they have and it's showing which bin it belongs in, right? And that is the fundamentals, the secret sauce of it is that experience that we've created around that on quickly detecting, making it easy for a person to use. And then, not everybody cares about recycling or sustainability. How do you get more than just the sustainability advocates or the eco champions? You've got a broad range of people walking up to the bin, and incentives, rewards, grouchiness of the Oscar really, really works, right?
Right.
I mean, I kid you not. When Oscar grouches at people, it'll essentially call them out, right? And trust me, nobody wants to be called out by a bin. And when that happens, and again, public shaming works. And when that happens, you see sometimes the person kind of looks left and right. People are looking, and then he takes the item out and puts it in the right bin.
No way. That's crazy. What a response. Wow. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, very cool. Well, this is awesome. I mean, it's clearly you're observing that change, and the AI can be more effective because of, particularly in a stadium venue, for example, there's a limited number of items that are available in that stadium. And there are certainly some items are more common than others. And so again, if we design at the extremes, as we say, but we test at the mean, we can have an incredible impact, not only on the environment in this case, but on the user. So with that being said, and maybe you could speak more broadly to how will AI insert itself into more places in our life? And is this a welcome change to get these AI nudges along the way? Or should AI be invisible? What's your opinion in that respect?
I think eventually it will be invisible. And, when you look at sort of how our team uses it, it is mostly invisible, right? It is. And I look at AI sustainability or AI specifically, how that will be in 5 years. I think every single person, if they're not already using the assistance of ChatGPT or some AI tool, then in their work, whether it's design or whether they're a lawyer or an engineer or a teacher, if AI is not being utilized, then you've really got to change. Because I look back at, I remember growing up in Dubai, on how Dubai, there's pros and cons of everything, right? But the biggest case study to the world is how Dubai was revolutionized from a desert to what it is. And when Sheikh Mohammed was going through this whole change, the fundamental thing that he was recommending or preaching in a summary was, we've got to change or we will be changed. And I think that's the essence that people need to understand here is change or be changed. And if you look down, again, this is sort of the grim side of it, when Trump starts asking people to kind of start resigning and things like that, you've, again, very, very grim situation. But if you are not already using AI to redline a contract, to understand a specific thing, to be 100x faster in your job, then you're not going to be able to compete with others that are. And that same thing applies in the waste space. If people are not looking at AI and they're thinking this is sort of a TikTok trend that is going to pass by, well, buddy, it's going to get real really quickly.
Yeah. I mean, good for you, but I agree with you. It's that the genie's out of the bottle, so to speak, and Pandora has left the box, and it's up to us to fight for our right, if you will, to ensure that AI augments human interaction, but doesn't replace human interaction. And certainly there are places where AI can make us more efficient, no doubt. I always go back to the example. Excel may have put a few bookkeepers out of business but to your point, if you were back in the 80s maintaining a paper ledger of debits and credits, you had to understand that your career was probably pretty short. But again, if you look at the benefits that Excel had in terms of making accountants more efficient and effective, but also expanding throughout the economy, I think we would absolutely take the impact of that innovation. And I think we need to take a similar approach to AI. I understand AI is a bit more of an advanced technology than Excel. I get that. But at the end of the day, It's still about the human adoption cycle and the rate at which we bring on change.
100% agrees. 100% agree.
Thank you. So I like to wrap up conversations by asking each of our guests the same question, and that is, what is one thing that I haven't asked you about today that you'd like to share?
One thing that I think, generally as engineers or entrepreneurs that are just starting off, you think the original idea is the best and the original business model is the best. I think one thing that we significantly realize now, as we've put out Oscars and we have paying customers across the world, is that we've built this engagement network. And we shouldn't be looking at it as single individual Oscars, but this is a network that essentially can map out an entire country's waste stream, right? And for us, we call it the Oscar Materials and Media Exchange. And for us to get to that dent in the universe moment, or getting to that reality, it is not we help one airport and two universities individually here and there and constantly all the time. It is how can they work with each other. And so for us, it's become this massive community that actually we are building and having access to the cleanest and the best materials in the world. At the same time, for brands that are trying to communicate and do the right thing, well, this is the way on how you can reach people in a new medium that people actually prefer to spend time, right? There's that taboo and stigma that a lot of people have is like, but that's a trash bin. Well, that's the same thing as AI. Change or be changed, because this is a mechanism people are choosing, data is showing, and they love. And this is where we're meeting them. Starting with them and not you as the brand, as like, hey, here's my advertisement. See, like I'm doing all these great. Start with them, meet them where they're at, and then use AI and data to essentially provide them something that's curated. And so that's really where we've become this marketplace and turned the waste problem to, rather than being for a waste industry, we've turned it into an advertiser or a marketing solution.
Yeah,
And
so powerful.
that flip of a positioning is critical because, people are not going to keep on paying for the green tax and the sustainability premium. You have to, at the end of the day, position things and make sure you are helping people's bottom line, but at the same time, get your mission across and vision across.
I love that. And I will say, Hassan, you are in all of our conversations, you've just stood out as a very human-centered entrepreneur, respecting the individual, taking the time to meet their needs, and then having technology be in service to their needs. And even as you plan forward, begin to anticipate how those human-centered needs will evolve. And from your time at Tesla, I'm sure you learned that it's not about obviously it's the engineering superiority of their product, but at the end of the day, those are not cars they're building, they're nodes in a data network. And if you look at your Oscars as you said, nodes in a data network,
Yep.
Right, you're an AI company, and that application can have so many downstream effects. So I'm fascinated by your business. I love your approach. And I just thank you so much for taking the time to share a little bit of your process and thinking behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And it's just an exciting future for your company.
No, I appreciate you having us on, Jeff. And I love talking trash. So,
Well, I won't call you during the NBA playoffs, though. We'll let that go.
sure.